Well, messaging is really interesting. Messaging is incredibly important to both enterprise as well as to consumers. And the two reasons for that are, first of all, like 10 years ago, we went through and re-engineered all the business processes. We took out faxes, we took out telexes. What do we put in instead? We put in email. And email is fundamental to the way most business transactions are conducted nowadays. In fact, what makes it even more important is devices like BlackBerries, like iPhones, and the rest. What it means is consumers as well as businesses almost have an expectation of receiving messages on an instantaneous basis. The beauty with email messaging is it's asynchronous, it's cheap, it's ubiquitous across the world. So most people have access to email infrastructure, and at the end of the day, it's a common platform that folks are using, which leaves an audit trail. What we focus on specifically is trust, online trust, and restoring online trust. The problem we have in the messaging space is there's two things that are going on. There's an arms race that's going on. You have the spammers at one end attacking infrastructure, and you have the receivers at the other end trying to ensure that legitimate messages are delivered. That's a very complex problem. And in terms of that problem, it requires folks to have a very strong set of data, authenticated data. It relies on three key components: being able to identify who's sending you information, being able to authenticate that person is who they say they are, and thirdly, being able to see the reputation of that particular sender. And that reputation is very challenging because it's contextual. From contextual, what I mean by contextual is it means that different reputation for different people, for different senders, is different for different people. And that's where the actual mechanism of trying to establish reputation is challenging. But overall, it builds back into an environment. And our vision is very much to build an environment where online transactions are conducted between people, are conducted within a trustworthy environment. The big problem that we're finding, and certainly our analysis to date across a large number of enterprise customers, both in Asia-Pac as well as across the world, is that the enterprises are the big losers. What we're finding is good legitimate emails from good, reputable, authenticated senders being filtered by the anti-spam filters. To a large extent, the anti-spam filters have a very large challenge. That challenge is that they're dealing with huge volumes of emails coming through, and they're trying to decipher who's good and which is a good email from which is a not good email. The problem we have is how do you do that accurately? Spam filters, and if you speak to any of the anti-spam filter vendors, they will all recognize that they make mistakes. There's no question about it. Certainly our evidence shows that good legitimate emails from business correspondents are being lost on a regular basis. That Gartner, interestingly enough, Gartner has a standard for it. The Gartner Group has published a standard which they say is 1 in every 400,000 emails is an acceptable false positive rate. In reality, what we find is most anti-spam filters are at least 100, if not 1,000 times over that error rate, which is, if you think of the implications to businesses in terms of the business processes that rely on messaging infrastructure, it's dreadful. Let me give you an example. One of our customers in Australia was a little bit suspicious that their anti-spam filter was blocking legitimate emails, but they had no proof of it. They asked us to conduct a study, and we went through and did a quick study for them. We were able to show them emails from Qantas, from the Australian government, as well as from their largest supplier, all being incorrectly blocked by their existing anti-spam filter. That was a big enough issue for them to recognize that if these emails were being dropped, even if they were on an occasional basis, what it meant was they were risking the actual business processes, the underlying business processes which relied on these emails. They were talking about the issues that they were facing, or they would face potentially, were customer satisfaction issues, risk and compliance issues, as well as revenue opportunities, particularly for new customers. It's interesting you say that people don't complain about the issue. What we've noticed, and we did some research on Twitter, people do recognize that they're losing legitimate mail. Either emails going into their junk folder mistakenly, or they're just simply not getting the emails that they should be. What we're finding is, we looked through a day's worth of tweets and found something like 25 of those tweets being based around false positives. what we're finding as well is across an organization, people don't necessarily complain. People don't complain about every single technology glitch. They also don't complain. How can they complain about emails which never got to them when they weren't necessarily expecting them? That's where the collateral damage really exists here. I mean, that's where if you are not expecting an email from somebody and it gets put into your junk folder or it doesn't get delivered at all, how do you know that you had that email? How do you know that that email never was going to get to you? And if you can't tell that email was going to get to you, how can you complain about it? I mean, in fact, the industry to a large extent has been able to hide behind the fact that there's a very low complaint rate. That complaint rate is completely at odds with the evidence that we're finding within an enterprise and government environment where the false positives do exist. First and foremost, the technology is designed to work alongside any anti-spam filter in the marketplace. So it's not designed to replace it. The anti-spam filter does a particular task. What we're saying is that there is a particular side effect of the anti-spam filter. BoxSentry's technology is designed specifically to alleviate that issue. The issue that we tend to, the way that our technology works is we learn purely through network traffic, so there's no user interaction whatsoever, but we do three things. We learn identity, reputation, and authentication around emails. The first thing is we look to identify emails coming from known correspondents. We learn from network traffic that these are the senders of emails to and from an organization. We identify them, but we also authenticate them. So we use a series of authentication techniques to ensure that the person who's sending the email is actually who they say they are. The third thing is we track reputation. So we use a combination of two pieces. We track reputation of a sender within an organization using effective social network principles. We also augment that with our Trust Cloud product. By augmenting Trust Cloud, which is our global authenticated reputation database, we're able to say, here are the good senders versus bad senders. So effectively, the way an enterprise or a service provider is able to use our technology is alongside the existing technology, alongside their existing anti-spam technology, with a view to being able to have much more finite data, much more accurate data around who the good senders are. I mean, the bulk of the industry to date has focused on blocking out bad senders, and it does a reasonably good job of it. However, what it does is it also blocks legitimate senders to a large extent with a counterbalance. And in some ways, I'd argue an even more important counterbalance to blocking spam, because we're protecting legitimate email traffic. Well, first and foremost, I think the ISPs, certainly the ISPs that we're working with, recognize that the whole idea of false positives on the inbound side is a very big issue. It's a big issue for them from a customer satisfaction perspective, from a support perspective, which is, many of them recognize that a quality of service for their clients is very important to their overall service standards. And in many ways, this allows a service provider to provide that or deliver the quality of service that they would like their clients to receive. Secondly, it also allows them kind of counterintuitively to increase the aggressiveness of the anti-spam filter which is in place. So by being able to fast track legitimate traffic straight through, what they're able to do is turn up the aggressiveness of the anti-spam filter. By doing so, what they're able to do is actually decrease or reduce the footprint of the servers which are required to process the spam. There's another big issue that's at play, and that's actually one around outbound spam. I mean, one of the big issues that's occurring in the industry right now is the infestation of networks with bots and zombies. What they tend to do is send out spam from those environments, from those networks. By doing that, what they tend to do is cause the ISPs, IPs, to be put onto block lists, which actually impacts deliverability on the outbound side. What our technology is very clever at doing is being able to assert, based on social networking principles, right, a correspondence map for senders and receivers. In that way, we're able to very accurately stream outbound email for the client, for our ISP clients. Some of our existing clients are folks like Singtel. Singtel's a very interesting organization. They are a fairly large ISP in Singapore, but across the Asia-Pac region, they have a very, very large footprint. In fact, to put into perspective, they have something like 280 million mobile subscribers across Asia-Pac. They recently selected us to be the exclusive platform for their cloud initiative, for their global cloud, the rollout of their global cloud initiative called Alatum. So we've recently signed a deal with an organization called Senmail. Senmail works extensively with Fortune 500 companies in the US. They also work they work extensively with ISPs in Japan in addition to enterprise customers. From our side, that's a very interesting, it's a very important channel for us because it allows us to take our technology into the environments we consider to be high volume, high criticality messaging environments, in particular around the financial services sector and government sector. We're also working with Hewlett-Packard. We're working with Hewlett-Packard across the Asia-Pac region. They are working with us to take our technology out to their enterprise clients, all the way from Australia up to Japan. TrustCloud has a very specific mandate. It's to remove a lot of the noise that exists within the messaging infrastructure. To a large extent, it's about restoring trust within that messaging infrastructure, being able to decipher who the good email senders are and the good domains are from others. As the world moves towards IPv6, that becomes incredibly important because from an IPv4 perspective, there's a limited amount of space. IPv6 opens that up quite considerably. It changes the paradigm in terms of the way filtering organizations are going to have to work. To a large extent, TrustCloud is designed to bridge that gap, by changing the paradigm from looking for bad senders to ones who are looking for good senders, good, reputable, authenticated senders. TrustCloud has the ability and the capability to really change the way infrastructure is deployed right across the world, particularly in terms of messaging, but in applications well beyond that too. TrustCloud works with XPF and DKIM, so it builds and extends from authentication. In many ways, authentication provides a base, and reputation can only be built off of identified or authenticated identities. Meng Wang, who's the architect of TrustCloud, was one of the original designers of SPF, and in many ways, his vision was that authentication provides a base upon which reputation is built. To an extent, BoxSentry is taking that particular vision and embodying it into TrustCloud.